Well, thanks for joining us. We are doing some training for how we want to use our board, as well as this new strategic initiative the elders have tasked us with to do assimilation retention. We're going to call this the Next Steps meeting, and beginning in January 9th, we're going to actually get the Next Steps meeting or this machine running. This week and next week is training, and also a chance if you have questions that you're going, hey, how does this work or how does that work? I can answer those. And of course, at any point, you can follow up with Dan or I about what's going on. But really, this is important to the elders, and this is consequently important to us because we got a problem. We're not getting enough contact information for visitors. People are trying to connect to our church and having a hard time doing it. We're struggling to get people into small groups, and we're really not able to do business as usual and get as many people plugged into our church as we would like. And because some of these pieces, which is no fault to any person, rather I think it's some structure problem or a process problem, we're trying to come up with a strategy to better incorporate people into our church. So our plan moving forward is let's come up with a process and a strategy that involves all of us together being on this assimilation team. And what that means is previously we've had one person or a couple people tasked with make sure you connect the new visitors, make sure you call them, make sure you visit them, make sure you send a card to them. And then all of these people feel like they're on one person's shoulders to make sure they get plugged into the life of the church. And you know, one person can perhaps manage 5 or 10, but over the course of time and with the size of our church, it just gets to be rather impossible for that to be one person's job. And so we're going to start spreading that out and do this as a team. And say, as a team, we want people to begin to feel really sticky to you and I, and that visitors begin to be noticed by us, and we pay attention to who's new and how can we connect you. So all of us begin to share some of this responsibility, and there will be some opportunity for all of us to be a part of handwritten notes, phone calls, Facebook or social network, as well as just follow up to say, hey, how are you connecting? Who are you, and where do you fit into our deal? So the way we're going to do this is spend 30 minutes a week with this kind of all-hands-on-deck meeting, and then in this meeting, we'll try to make it quick, we'll try to make it fun, we'll try to make it well worth your time. We'll start assigning, hey, can you call them? Can you write a note? Can you do this? Can you do that? And we've got a plan for some of our steps that we'll script to help you do that. And ideally, as we get this machine running, there won't be many people falling through the cracks. Or if somebody all of a sudden is off our radar, we all know it, and we have a plan for what to do about it. And so some people will inevitably connect and walk through our pathway well, walk the next steps, while some won't. But we just want to have a better feel on how that's going. And so ultimately, that's what Dan and I have been working on real hard for the last month and a half. And I think we have a good plan. Certainly there's some holes in our plan. We're inventing something a little bit here that we're creating it in a way we've not done before here. But we're having a good time doing it. We're going to, Dan and I have kind of adopted this approach. We're going to fail forward. There's going to be some things on this that we look back and go, oh, that works so well. And then there's going to be some things that, you know, even within the first couple weeks, you are going to know and we're going to know that is not working. And when that happens, we'll tweak and we'll move on. So we've got this process to assist visitors from their first time at First Free, because what we want to have happen is we want visitors to know how to meaningfully connect with our church and take the next steps in our process. So here's the goal, simply put, in one sentence. We want to efficiently, and by efficiently I mean effectively, lovingly, and quickly, welcome and integrate visitors into covenant membership with First Free. That's the big idea. I'll say that again. We want to efficiently welcome and integrate visitors into covenant membership with First Free. So if you said, Jer, the big idea, that's right. We want you to be members and be committed to our church. And we want to help visitors move that process really easily. Well, one of the challenges here is perhaps you know some success stories. I don't know if you know some failure stories. Dan and I were just visiting yesterday about what are 2 examples, one that seems to have done this well, and then where's one that we failed. And so I wanted Dan to just share a little bit about one of each of those, if you would.
We talked about Kent and Kathy Perry as a couple who didn't really get into our church well. They came, they were here for quite a while. Initial connection was good. Within a month or so after they came here, Kathy's mom got really sick, and I got a call from one of her friends, and so I went up to the hospital and for several days spent time with them at the hospital, went to the funeral when her mom died, and we connected well as individuals. But they didn't feel they could crack into an ABF. They just felt kind of stymied every time they tried to crack into the fellowship of an ABF. They tried a couple of different ones and they just didn't feel, and notice I say they didn't feel that they could connect in. It's their perception, it's their feeling, it may be the truth, it may not be the truth. But it is hard for people to get into some of our ABFs at times if they're new, because if they're not aggressive, it's just a hard fit sometimes. They didn't feel like they fit. They've moved back to a different church. They have no hard feelings about being here, but they just felt that we weren't really a church that they could get assimilated into. Now, on the other hand, we have Debbie Inns and her two boys, Dylan and Nathan. And they heard about us through Warren Snyder up at the Northfield Academy. Debbie also heard about us through Choices Medical Clinic, where she's working. But they came and got here, and the next week, they came to one of our newcomer lunches that Warren was putting on. They came to the lunch, they met several of us, they kind of got involved, and they took the next step to actually come to my 6-week What is the Gospel Bible study that we were offering to people who were coming to the newcomers lunch. And so they came to that faithfully with a couple other folks, and by the end of that time, they were also working. The boys were over at Frontline Youth Ministry, sorry. Frontline dies hard in my, yeah. Debbie was also getting involved in a couple of things here with an ABF, and she felt like she assimilated well. They then came to a closer look class. They took all the information there. All three of them have done membership and have become members. And the boys are involved in small groups at Frontline, and Debbie's going to be involved in a small group that Karen and I are starting in January. So she followed our path almost perfectly, even though we didn't have a path at the time. But that's two examples. One couple that it didn't work, one family that it did.
Yeah, that's good. And just this Sunday night, I got to meet the Harders. Some of you have met them, David and Sarah Harder. And I was just visiting with them, and Dan was saying he's got them planning to join his small group this January. And they're an example of somebody who very quickly have checked out our church. They heard about us on the website, and now they've got a good plan for how they're going to get connected. They're covenant members, and they're going to join a group, which is ultimately, the big idea of this is to get, if you look at your Next Steps page there, at the top of it says Next Steps, the idea is to get them to steps 6 and 7, where they're becoming a church member, and they join. Did you have a question?
No, I was thinking of the Harders when Dan was talking, because they sat at the end of our pew, their first or second week, I don't know.
Yeah.
And Christy introduced herself, and I think Matt was there too.
Yeah.
And told them about the 1-by-1 class.
Cool.
That they lead.
Yeah.
So they've gotten in there.
Love it.
And so.
And it's that kind of thought and that kind of attitude that some people in our church, and you perhaps already have. I confess, I don't always have that attitude on a Sunday morning. I sit next to people, and there's been this couple that have sit next to Brooke and I a couple times, and I've watched as they're new to our church, so I understand, and they won't sign in or do anything. And I've given the friendship register, and I've introduced myself, but I just kind of get this sense there, or from him at least, he doesn't want to be here. And so just to have a more proactive role in what am I going to do? It's not somebody else's job, but what am I going to do to help that guy integrate well into our church and connect them? And so I appreciate people who take the initiative. And something I want us to be aware of and thoughtful for is, how are you doing it? And then how are you seeing our laity do that well? And let's encourage and support and create this culture where that's really promoted and understood, if it's not already. Well, we've got two sides of a paper that help kind of unpack the basics of our plan. If you go to the Next Steps side, what you're going to see is 7 steps, and these 7 steps are what we determine are the fewest steps necessary without making this huge leap for a person who comes to corporate worship for the first time to join a group. So what we've tried to do is kind of script a pathway where a person or a couple or a family can take a step week after week after week and get them into a place where as visitors they begin to understand what our church is, what our vision is, how to connect, and where we're wanting them to go. And so step one, corporate worship, of course, Sunday morning worship center. We're going to start this step 2. This is new to us, and we're calling it 10-minute welcome. This is an experiment. This thing might work really well, or this thing might be an epic fail. Again, if it is, we'll tweak. If not, we're excited about it. 10-minute welcome will happen weekly after every service. Josh finishes his benediction, or whoever finishes the benediction. We'll have a deacon who sets up a little sign right up front that says 10-minute welcome here, and we'll have some of our staff, maybe a few elders, whoever, walk up there, and we'll make it a regular part of the bulletin and part of the announcement as necessary. Hey, if you're new, if you haven't been here very long, we'd sure love to invite you to come join us at 10-minute welcome and meet some of our team. And so ideally, a couple who it's their first week or second week, maybe even third week. It doesn't take really long. If they have kids, they're still in childcare, but hopefully they can come right up to this kind of 10-minute welcome area. Some of our laity perhaps could say, hey, oh, it's your first week. Can I walk you up to 10-minute welcome? There'll be a handful of us up there. Shake hands and just say, hey, my name's Jeremy. My name's Dan. My name's Tom. We're so glad that you're a part of this. So the idea would be they just have a first natural connection, so when we get their name on a report, hopefully they've had a chance to be a part of that 10-minute welcome and get a good face, handshake, I know somebody there. So that's the idea with 10-minute welcome. As we do 10-minute welcome, what we're going to say, and some of what I want you to, some language I want you to adopt is to begin thinking next step, next step, next step. And the way that works is they come to our 10-minute welcome, they say, hey, I'm Jeremy, I'm so glad to meet you. Thanks for joining us. I hope you feel welcome here at our church. We're sure glad you're here. I'd encourage you to take our next step, which is our coffee connection. And then I would explain that program. What coffee connection is second and fourth Sundays in the hospitality room at 10:20. We're thinking it's a 15, 20-minute time. We'll have a deacon in charge of that. Again, we'll put a sign out that's outside of the hospitality room so people who are newer to our church understand what it is. We'll make sure our donut tables got the information. We'll make sure the ushers, greeters know that Coffee Connection is today. We'll have some signs up, and we'll have our Welcome Center online. So everybody has, as well as you, hey, today's Coffee Connection. And so the idea is, oh, we'd love to see you at Coffee Connection. And what will happen in that area is they'll come in for 20 minutes, and it's a chance for us to go a little deeper, share some of our vision, maybe even get a pulse on where are you at in relationship to the gospel. Do you believe the gospel? How did you hear about First Free? That's a question we want to be bringing up. Perhaps that would be a time where we could say, did you come from a different church? And we can begin to get a handle on is some of this transfer growth that we're experiencing. Is this new believer growth? What's really going on there? And so that Coffee Connection will have some nice little pastries, maybe a little upgrade from the traditional donut selection. We'd like to give a little gift there, this little How to Listen to a Sermon. It's called Listen Up by Ash. And we want to encourage them there as we get a chance to share some vision. Here's how we do corporate worship, share some of the Glory, Grace, Go. We want it to be simple, but we want it to be thoughtful what happens in that little Coffee Connection time. And so that will happen. Again, we'd like to get names and faces. Ideally, a handful of you would be able to join us there, or if you've met them initially or you shook their hand at our 10-minute welcome, perhaps you could come in there when they join us for that coffee time. So then it's just a little more people that they know. What is more, we hope that we can introduce them to some other visitors who are about at the same timetable on how long they've been there. So that's Coffee Connection, and as we share with them a little bit, we might even take a little picture if we can do that without coming across as a creeper. We'll say, we're so glad you came to Coffee Connection. We'd encourage you to your next step. And as you see there, it's Closer Look. Now, Closer Look's going to be a little different than we've done it in the past. We're going to run it 9:15 in the hospitality room, and we're going to encourage them to come to 2 weeks. That's the bare minimum for the Closer Look. The third week is an introduction to how we're thinking about small groups or our groups. Step 7, and we can cast some vision there. But at a closer look, we'd like to give them a gift. What is the Gospel by Gilbert? So again, they're getting a little more committed. They've been here a little longer. My guess is this is more, they've been here for 6 or 8 weeks by the time they're joining us at a closer look. But we're doing 2 strategic things with both Step 3 and Step 4. And that is, we're trying to run it while a family who's new can come and have childcare available without taking an extra time slot. It's not an afternoon, it's not another evening of the week, but they can come perhaps before they've connected with an ABF. If they come at 9 o'clock, they can drop their kids off, and then they can join us for a closer look and get some of that information and have a good, I think the time slot will work well with them, as well as we'll have childcare available if that's an issue. So, coffee connection, a closer look, and then at that place we'll say, we're so glad you joined us for a closer look. We really encourage you to your next step. And this one is new. We're trying another experiment. We're calling it Meet the Blacks. I don't know about you guys, but if you haven't had dinner at the Black House with the Blacks doing the black thing, then you haven't really been to a good dinner yet. There are lots of fun ways to connect. For Brooke and I, when we got to see Josh and Maggie and company in action, I had this change where I thought, I had this perception of who Josh is based on how I saw him in front of people, and my guess is some people might have a little bit of that now. And then when you get to see him in his natural habitat, it's like, oh man, I'm just won over. I think he has a winsomeness about him, and we want people to get a sense of who the lead pastor is and get to see Maggie do her thing and watch the kids do their thing, and in the midst of it all, JB, BJB. And so we're going to do this quarterly deal where if you want, you can come over to the lead pastor's house on maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, kind of hors d'oeuvres, late afternoon. We'll work out some of the time there. But it's a chance to actually relate directly with Josh and have visitors or people who are walking through our pathway ask questions, and then Josh is going to share vision, some of that being the centrality of the gospel, our corporate worship structure, some of this gather, scatter, deep and wide language. And it's at that point we'd like to give another gift to them. And this one is our little book by Lehman called Church Membership. It's this little blue book. If you haven't had a chance to look at that book, that gives a real simple and solid defense for church membership. It's a real simple read. I'd encourage you to do that. But we'll give them that book as they begin to investigate their next step. My sense is if we get people to step 4, I think we're going to have a high percentage of people who stick and want to commit. That's my sense, which is why after step 5, we would say, hey, your next step is to become a church member. They can pick up a membership packet here. Of course, that'll be the way we've been running it with an elder and a deacon, doing some interviews. They apply. We share some more vision and encourage them to their next step, which is we'd really love you to join a group. And that can be a group that's being led on Tuesday morning with Joe and her team. That could be a group that Kurt's in or Dan's doing. It could be a new group. Some of our thinking is as we work through some of our sermon-based small group thoughts, that there might be enough of a critical mass that we could start a new group of people who are about the similar timetable of this. And so that's our next steps process, and our thinking here is we want to script out steps that help people get assimilated into our group without making gigantic strides. Questions about our next steps here that I didn't cover that would be helpful for you?
On step 2,
Uh-huh.
is it just whoever shows up, or will you be assigning, or say, you've got a month, somebody else has got a month, so it's not completely hit in this?
Yeah, we'll probably need a little more formality to who's available. Maybe it's whoever's leading the service. That would be an expected person, and then for some of our laity, as we can, or task a few of the elders to join us up there. We'll make a note of that. Get that firmed up a little bit.
Jeremy, I have a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked Dick to get copies of What is the Gospel and church membership for everybody on the support staff that hasn't read those books, so they know what we're giving people.
Yeah.
Also, maybe good to have as many of you who are available to come to the meeting that Matt and I are leading on January 6th, where we talk about the elders' vision for small groups, so that you've got a picture of that as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. So January 6th, and that meeting's at what time?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. here
in A6,
in A6.
I believe.
January 6th, 6 p.m. A6. We'd like you to be there if you can. That way you have an idea of what you're encouraging.
Of what this step 7 is.
Yeah, what is step 7?
Anyone that's interested.
It needs to be in the bulletin.
Of course.
I think
I
step
think we
five
should make
is
that announcement.
actually a really cool idea.
I think you run
Because
into
I think a lot of people don't
holidays,
get a chance to
Sundays
meet
pretty soon.
a pastor and his
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I don't
Let's,
know how you will, but she seems
let's throw
like
that in
she
an email
really
today.
likes to be hospitable.
Right.
And so I think people would be drawn to that.
to them.
I do too.
I
I'm
think
thinking,
that's cool you put that in there.
yeah, at a church this size, to be able to go have a couple hours with the lead pastor after being here for 4 or 6 weeks, I think is a super gift. So, thank you. If you have other questions, by all means, let me know. If you turn it over, we're calling this our next contacts. And this is where kind of the rubber hits the road with this plan. So here's what happens. You see a copy of our little magnet. I asked the lady to have those ready. They're the size of our 52 club magnets, and they'll go on this board. I'll get to that in a sec. But what we're going to do is we're going to start tracking based on what Sundays they're there. And on our little magnet, you'll see we have a little blank for what Sundays are. This isn't to scale. But what we're going to start doing is writing in some initials next to the welcome letter, handwritten note spaces. And then in Sundays, we're going to start writing dates. And then on next steps, we'll hit check boxes depending on what steps people run through. So at the very top of this magnet, what you're going to find is we'll put in a name. Let's say it's the Romigs. And so we put Kurt, Michelle, Izzy. Maybe we make a little note about how old Izzy is. And if they've come here one Sunday, we'll put in the Sunday date, and it says 12/9. And then on our meeting, we'll say we need to send them this kind of inaugural welcome letter that everybody gets. The front desk does it. Josh signs it. And we'll put initials, who's doing that, Pam's doing that, and here's the date it went out. Then maybe following Sunday, December 16th, they came, we write that in on a Sunday, and it's this point that we're ready to do a handwritten note to them. And maybe Joe got to meet the Romigs at church, and so, hey Joe, why don't you write them a handwritten note, and we'll actually put some notes out here. We're going to actually just have you do it once the meeting is done, so it's there and it's finished. And if Mary Lou says, man, I got to meet them, well, just write a little thing on the side too. That would be okay. Or it can just come from Joe. We don't have to. But then I write in that little box, Joe Coltrane, the date she wrote that, and we're watching them on the magnet. And in the note, you see we have a little idea. You don't have to use this. We're just trying to simplify it for you. You can copy our little deal here as a way to encourage them. Hey, thanks for joining us at First Free this past Sunday. It's great meeting you. I'd like to invite you to join us at our next step for visitors. Coffee Connection, Sunday, whatever date we're running it at 10:20 in the hospitality room. We'd like to give you a small gift and share the vision of our church service and program. Okay, so maybe the Romigs don't come back for a couple weeks. Now we're into January. We asked our team, which is ironically enough led by Kurt Romig, to get the EE team out there. So he goes to visit himself, and we get a report on them and say, how did it go, and what'd you find out? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they believe the gospel. Izzy's a little weak on it, but she's working on it. Let's figure out what we need to do there. Okay, great. They had a visit just yesterday, so we're not going to do something on this meeting, but make a note for next meeting, we're going to do a phone call. And so it's the next Sunday, they came back, and Dick says, yep, I got to meet them. And hey, Dick, would you give them a call today and then just let us know what happened? And so Dick calls them 9:47 when we get done this meeting, and he lets us know on the following, maybe he gives Dan and I an email that says, here's how the phone call went. 2 thoughts. Most people nowadays aren't going to answer the call on the first time, it seems to me. And so the idea is use this little script here for your voicemail on what to say, and basically it says, this is who I am, this is why I'm calling, this is when you can expect a call back. And if I was you, I would probably say something like, I'll plan to call back tomorrow at 5:30 p.m., after work, before supper. And then hopefully they pick up on the next time. My suggestion would be 2 phone calls is probably enough. We don't, again, want to be creepers, but we're trying to do enough contacting that they come in. Again, maybe the following week we do a social networking contact. But what we're trying to do is help you see clearly how are you to follow up with them. We'll assign that in this next steps meeting. Who met them? Okay, nobody met them, so this week we've just got to get a couple of our staff team meeting these people. And that's how the magnet will work. And then what happens on our board to explain this point is we take this little magnet, and depending on what step they're at, they attend corporate worship, they start here at 1, we go over to 10-minute welcome, and we kind of walk through our piece. So we have a constant idea of who's where on our next steps process, and you guys can also know, oh, I just met them, we need to start a magnet for them, or, maybe we find out that we've been encouraging a family who's still at step 2 for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we have an idea of where to, how to follow up well with them. I think some people will naturally flow through our next steps process, and some people will have a little tougher time. But on the back page here is just a little simple Excel file piece that allows you to write in what you'll personally be responsible for. And so that's how our next contacts will work, and we'll assign it here. And again, some of this will work really smoothly initially, and some of it will be tricky. But we want you to be clear what you're supposed to do, and we want to be clear on what we're trying to do with our board. You guys have any questions about next contacts, scoreboard, or magnets?
I have a question about order.
Yeah?
Say we have a Meet the Blackets quarterly and they haven't done closer look yet. Do we want people to come to closer look before we encourage you to do that, or is it?
Good question. What I think are the non-negotiables are step 1, step 4, step 6. If a person just said, I want to do the bare minimum, I'd say 1, 4, and 6. If they're ready to become a church member during the interview and they haven't gone through step 4, we'll task the deacons and elders to ask some real pointed questions in the event they're not as clear on some of these pieces as necessary. They don't have to go in this order. We could be able to backfill a little bit, but we want them to get through those. So good question.
Some people we never get, not never, but we just don't get phone numbers for them.
Yeah, and Dan and I have been working on that. We've got a few ideas that will be unfolding on how to get some of that. We'll never get everybody's, but I think maybe we can get more than we have. And we'll talk next training about a hospitality team that we're kind of creating to help with some of those pieces. Well, I'll be able to answer other questions. Some of what's, if you have them, please let me know. Some of what I'm thinking and what Dan and I have been discussing and we're realizing is this is a little bit of a culture change, and that's going to be kind of hard. I know it's hard on me. When I'm there Sundays, I want to get my list done. I want to talk to the people I want to talk to. I'm trying to go hurry up and get Quincy and Clara because they're always fussy and hungry, which makes Brooke and I tense and nervous, and we're just, and that's all still going to happen and be real, but I want to be real proactive on thinking about visitors and what I want us to begin to learn, and then I want this to be able to drip down into the laity and the people that you're discipling and the people that you're caring for, and all of those on our teams begin thinking like this. Who is this that I'm meeting right now? I need to learn names, I need to learn faces. And I don't want to, I want to just take this excuse out of anybody's hand if they're using it. I'm not good with names. Well, nobody's good with names if you don't try. I'm horrible with names too, but let's be real proactive at learning names and faces. And then begin to ask this question regularly when you meet people if you're not sure what to say. How'd you hear about First Free? How'd you learn about First Free? Who told you about it?
And write that down.
Yes. For me, I just have to write this stuff in my phone all the time on a reoccurring appointment on Sunday morning so I know who's the new people and what have I found out, because we want to know that information. Then be thinking, what's their next step? You guys don't have to have this memorized. I do because we've been eating, drinking, and sleeping this stuff for a few weeks. But we'd like for you to be able to know what's their next step. So if you meet them on Sunday morning, hey, join us at 10-minute welcome. Then be thinking, how can I connect with them? How can I put the monkey on my shoulders to help connect them and move them through our process? How will I remember and follow up with them? And how can I connect people to others who are in this kind of a place?
You know, one of the things that I can do in Shelby is find out people that live in a certain zip code.
Cool.
So if we have a new people come in and they're in a certain zip code, I can look, well, who else in our congregation lives in that zip code or in that area
Awesome.
that can kind of connect with them.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. That way we kind of have a sense of who's there and who's a natural affinity group. That's great. Mary Lou's been doing some work for us even to know how to track some of this in Shelby, so that on Shelby we'll be able to have some of this information there, and we appreciate your hard work. Now, we'll cover more next week, but as we finish our time here, this is the picture I thought of. My little niece went to meet Santa when she was 4 or 5 years old. Regardless of what you think about Santa, just roll with me for a second here. Went to meet Santa, and went to what I believe was Macy's, New York City. Now, I don't know if there's a much bigger place to go see Sandy than Macy's, New York City. Long line, maybe hundreds standing in line. And they get in line to go see Santa. And the line actually goes pretty quick, though it's really long. And before too long, they're getting close, and they kind of get to a centralized area, and then you notice that there's like 8 lines that kind of break off from this, and then they go behind a corner and around a deal. And somebody who's dressed like an elf, really well, mind you, comes up, and mom's holding little Graceland's hand and says, "Oh, do you see the elves? I see the elves. Are you excited to see Santa?" "Yes, I can't wait to see Santa." The elves, "Hi. Santa's so excited to see you." And he gets a name, learns a present, does a little thing. Before too long, maybe less than 10 minutes, okay, one of the biggest stores, week before Christmas, she's there with Santa. And she walks up to Santa, and Santa looks her in the eye and says, "Graceland, I'm so glad you've come to see me. I've been looking forward to seeing you, Graceland. Now, I understand you want that dollhouse, and I really want to bring you that dollhouse. Have you been a good girl?" And Graceland's go, "Yes, Santa. Santa, I've been such a good girl. Is there anything else I can do for you, Graceland? Have you been nice to your mommy?" "Yes, I've been nice to my mom." "Well, Graceland, I hope you sleep well Christmas Eve. I'm coming to see you. And if you can keep this up, there's going to be a little dollhouse for you." She walked out of there. Santa knows me. Okay, now, they live in Texas. They've gone to see Santa since. And guess what's the first thing she says when she sees Santa? "Now, you know my name?" She says, "Hey, little girl, come here." "No, what's my name, Santa?" They don't know their name. They don't know their name. They don't got that thing worked out. And I'm thinking to myself, well, my first thought was, we could do that Santa thing really well. Okay, we don't need another job, Brooke. We'll do this. But my thought was, if a store that's motivated by a bottom line, they don't even charge to see Santa, but if they can do this kind of production with elves and the deals, and they have a good system, a good process, so they get little kids to experience this magic that you don't find in many other department stores, period. If they can do that, we as a church who are motivated by much more than just making a buck off a kid's toy, we can do a good job of helping people come in here, and we want them to say, "You know my name. You're praying for me. You sent me a note. You made a call. You had people come visit me. You baked me cookies," and just said, I think we can get a system and a process where more people are cared for better. And that's what we're trying to do. So give us grace when we do some of this and we fail forward. If we strike out on a few things, we'll tweak it. You can give us some suggestions. But I think we can do this well, and I think we can do it better. And I'm excited for the chance to work together with you, kind of do this as a big rah-rah team. And I hope you're looking forward to it. So please shoot me questions if you have them. Let Dan know. Excited for next week. We'll kind of finish up our training piece. And then January 9, we're going to start this machine up and go. So let me pray for us. We'll be done. God, thanks for our